Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I will be painting yellow grim darkish Imperial fists with a combination of brush, airbrush and oil washes. In a previous video I already showed you the speed painting method I used on my Cursity models. If you haven't seen it yet, you can check it out in the right corner. The problem with that, similar to other methods like slap chop, is that it doesn't work very well on Space Marines. They have a lot of flat surfaces, which means that the contrast paint is going to dry blotchy and quite ugly if you are not super careful. However, I wanted to go for a look that is similar to the one I had on my Cursity heroes, a little bit more grimdark and less clean and cartoonish than the one I usually go for on my Space Marines. So let's see how well I managed. As you can see, I started from a black base coat. Normally I would go for a strong zenithal highlight followed by spraying contrast through the airbrush, but that would result in a very vibrant end result, which is not what we are going for here. Later on in the video I'll show you a comparison with these models and one that I sprayed over a white zenithal to see the difference. The airbrush has a lot of advantages when it comes to speed painting. First of all, it's fast, obviously, right? It's smooth and it's very reliable, and you are not bound by the weather, so you can use it even if the humidity is super high outside. You're not going to mess up your model permanently just because it was humid or because you didn't hold the model far enough from the can, or if the can is just bad, you are not going to just lose your model because of it. Achieving a nice even coat takes time, and doing that on a lot of models takes even more time. If you care about achieving a battle-ready standard and don't put much time into highlighting, then this is the stage in which you will be sinking a large portion of your time. That is especially true for Space Marines, since a large part of the model is the armor, which tends to be a single color. So when I want to do things relatively fast, mostly when I paint squads instead of single models, I try to take advantage of this and apply it quickly and efficiently with an airbrush. Since I wanted to paint yellow and build up the vibrancy to where I wanted it to be, I thought I would go for the same method I use for hand painting yellow, which is to add a brown undercoat. Since yellow paint is quite translucent, it is really tricky to apply it over black directly, no matter if you do it by hand or by airbrush. But at least with the airbrush, it only takes me a couple of minutes to do the brown coat, so not much time is wasted. So I apply a layer of brown on all the models, but without hitting the lower facing and more hidden surfaces. Those will serve as our shadows anyway. Once the brown layer is applied, I spray the models with yellow on top of the brown paint until I feel that everything is fully covered. The downside of the airbrush is that it desaturates the colors of the model, meaning that they are not going to be as vibrant as if you would be applying them with a brush. And while I wanted to avoid the cartoonish effect of contrast over white, I still felt that the yellow was too desaturated for my liking, so I punched up the vibrancy with contrast paints, since they are vibrant and transparent like inks. Whenever you would like to make your colors look more vibrant, you can do this trick. Simply find a contrast paint that matches the color you are painting, like Blood Angel's red for red, or in our case Imperial Fist yellow, and simply spray it over the already established base coat. Notice how the colors got much deeper and more vibrant. Now that our models are nice and yellow, it's time to make them a bit darker and more defined at the same time. Since I sprayed mostly from the top and from the front, the models still have quite a bit of dark in the shadow areas, which is good. but I would like those even darker, interesting, and more moody, I guess. An easy way to do this is by spraying a shadow color in those areas with an airbrush. Purple happens to be a great shadow color for yellow anyway, so it was the obvious choice. Here are 2 tips in case you would like to do something similar. Make sure to leave those dark areas I just mentioned under the model and mostly spray those. If you go with the purple over bright yellow, it will look funky instead of dark. And 2, make sure to thin whatever you are using for the shadow color quite a bit, which is a contrast paint in my case, and go slowly building up the shadows instead of trying to cover them in a single spray. Once again, it will look kinda groovy instead of dark otherwise. Time to apply some highlights. I went with a single highlight since I wanted to go fast and do the grimdark thing, plus this step will once again desaturate the yellow a bit more and I didn't want to lose too much vibrancy. So nothing fancy, just a bit of zenithal highlighting simulating some light hitting the surfaces facing up. And with that, I was done with airbrushing the models. It took me around an hour or a little bit more, but per model, you could speed this up quite a bit if you actually painted more models, so if you just batch painted them with the airbrush. The end results look like this. And for comparison, here's a more vibrant version that was done the normal way, let's say, with contrast over white zenithal, but with all the other steps done the same way. Retrospectively, was it worth going for the more complicated methods, or could I have just simply darkened down the more vibrant version? Who knows, hindsight as always is 2020. Time to use the brush. You can do a lot with the airbrush when it comes to Space Marines, especially because of all those surfaces that are single color, but in the end there is always going to be details that you just have to paint by brush. I find that the best way is to identify all the colors you will need beforehand, in this case black, brown and steel, and go through them one by one with normal colors first, followed by metallics. At this stage, the main objective is to avoid the yellow surfaces. Since I painted them with an airbrush, it will be extremely hard to color match the exact shades to correct something, so ideally I don't hit anything that I shouldn't. When I inevitably do hit something, I can either wipe it away quickly with a wet brush, or if I can't, it becomes battle damage, since these guys are meant to be grim-darkish and somewhat beaten up anyway. The brown parts are straightforward since there are only a few of them and not a lot of yellow elements are around them, so I can just hit them with a big brush. Here comes the tricky part. There is a lot of metal elements, and if I hit any of the yellow surfaces with the metal paint, that's going to be really difficult to remove. Here's how I usually deal with this step. I take a big but pointy brush. I know that everyone's first instinct is to use a small detail brush since you want to be precise, but that is a trap, don't fall for it. You want to get this done fast, so you need a brush that can hold a lot of paint, ideally enough that you only need to refill a couple of times for the whole model. You need precision too, but a small brush is not automatically more precise. That is determined by how pointy it is. Use metallic paint that you can trust to cover in a single pass. Doing this once is painful enough. If your paint needs 2-3 layers, it will be hell. I like Vallejo metallics for this purpose, and specifically now I used the darkest one I own since we are going for a darker look. And now we come to the secret sauce that ties the whole thing together, the same thing I use for the Cursed City models as well, an oil wash. Traditional washes will stain everything and you need to reapply the original paint again on much of the surface after the shading step. That is a ton of busy work in a process that is supposed to be fast. On the other hand, oil washes have a ton of benefits. You can apply them either selectively or on the whole surface, and you can simply wipe them off where they are not needed. They automatically flow into all the recesses. They take a long time to dry, and as long as they are wet, you can move them around, add or remove them, it's totally up to you. This is also their biggest disadvantage though. They take time to dry, which makes them a bit of a problem in a speed painting process. My solution to this is to time it so that I use them as the last step I do that day and then do everything else the next day when they are already dry. Which is fine by me since I usually don't have enough time to do the whole painting session in a single sitting anyway. Since I had a bit of time after the oil stage and I didn't want to work on the models until they dried, I used that time to work a bit on the bases. I had the yellow spots from the airbrushing under the models, and since I wanted to be efficient, I decided to work with it instead of against it. The idea being that the bases will be lighter the closer we get to the models, putting them, so to say, in the spotlight. I highlighted the inner parts a bit more and planned to add some dry pigments closer to the center once I was done with everything else. To be honest, after 3-4 hours of work here, you could just say that they are finished. You could maybe add some decals and finish some of the details like the face of the sergeant, and then call them tabletop standards and start playing with them. But what would be the fun in that? So I decided to add some highlights and battle damage. Not too much, since I still wanted to be done with these guys relatively quickly, but to me, these finishing touches are what really makes the models cool and unique, so it is always worth spending a couple of hours on it. To be honest, I sometimes spend more time here than on all the previous steps. And here's the end result. I think they look properly dark and beaten up compared to my usual dudes at least. Like they just trudged through the trenches of the Siege of Terra or something, which I feel is a fitting look for these Terminators. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have your own ways of painting Space Marines fast, please share it with us in the comments below. And as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.